Greetings, Leo and Leo rising. This is your Western forecast for December 2024. Mercury is going to be retrograde. Mars is going to be retrograde. That Mars can trigger a lot of jumping to conclusions and irritability. The Mercury in retrograde, the misunderstandings. So a lot of stress around the world. But Leo and Leo rising people are going to have a lot of benefits because we're going to always start with the new moon. The new moon's in Sagittarius, which starts December the 1st. So the whole month of December, that new moon draws your priorities and intentions to the 5th house. Because Sagittarius is 5 signs past Leo. Leo is a dynamic, inspirational, creative fire sign. And Sagittarius is an adventurous, outgoing fire sign. But the 5th house is similar to the 5th sign of the zodiac, which is Leo. Mars is going to be retrograde, a time to slow it down, rethink your impulse actions and all your ambitions and drives. I'll get more into that later. But the Mars is retrograding in Leo. And so Mars in Leo in your sign or your rising sign or your sun sign, it's triggering a lot of bold action, courage, confidence. So the new moon in harmony with Leo, the Mars in Leo, which is pretty favorable. Jupiter's in Gemini. Now I've been talking about that for a while because Jupiter goes from sign to sign once a year. The last days of May 2024, it went into Gemini, into early June 2025. Gemini is an air sign, bringing more fuel to the fire, and Jupiter is all that expansiveness. So there's a lot of resetting and being mindful and stresses happening. But in the bigger picture, Leo and Leo rising people, for the most part, are going to be more fortunate, a lot luckier. Now, before I break all that down and give you what you have to be mindful of, but also all these opportunities, and Venus, the planet of love and desire and romance, goes into Aquarius December the 6th for the rest of the month, once a year. Aquarius is opposite Leo. Opposite deals with others, the significant other. Venus is love. In Aquarius, it's moving through the 7th house of partnerships and marriage for Leo and Leo rising people. So there's so much positive energies, but all the retrogrades, there's certainly it's going to be a lot of tension and stress in the world. You're just going to be able to navigate, most of you will be able, because you got to look at your individual charts, but overall, you're going to be navigating all these choppy seas better than most. But before I break all that down, if you enjoy these kinds of videos and would like to see more of them, click like and subscribe. And don't forget to click on the notification bell so you can receive the latest postings. All right. Mercury is also retrograding in Sagittarius. The new moon's December the 1st in Sagittarius, but the new moon is being squared or inhibited by restricted controlling Saturn. Now, what this means for the whole world is going to be a certain amount of worrying about December, the events of December. Now, it's in the 5th house. Mercury, what you're thinking about, what you're discussing, Mercury is in Sagittarius in the 5th house. But I talked about Mercury in Sagittarius in last month's video because I said Mercury, decision-making Mercury, moved into your 5th house of Sagittarius November the 2nd until January the 8th. In fact, Mars retrogrades December the 6th, but it went into Leo on November the 3rd. Now, Mercury went retrograde November the 25th through December the 15th in the 5th house. Mercury has a lot to do with communications, technology, travel, and when it's retrograde, those first 2 weeks of December, you might be more misunderstandings, more disruptions, more delays. You've heard all this in the past. Now, but what your mind or what your plans, what your negotiations are on 5th house matters. In astrology, the first thing I think of with the 5th house, it's fun and games, because it's the house where we look to for children, and children like to be playful and play games. And so it's the 5th house that also rules over sports. 5th house of children, it's the 5th house of love and romance and to create children. But the 5th house is also where we look to for the creative expression, the creative outlet. So it's very creative and romantic and playful. It's bringing the inner child out. Could be some of you are focused on learning sports, or maybe that's your career, but with the Mercury in retrograde, maybe you're reevaluating. You're thinking about what's the next stage, and you're worried. There's a general worriness. May not be you because you're a Leo or Leo rising, but that new moon in the 5th, all those 5th house issues, there could be delays, Saturn, separations, worries with the Saturn. The Mars went into Leo, into your sign, November the 3rd. December the 6th, it retrogrades until February the 23rd. But it stays in Leo until January the 6th. Retrograde means it's appearing, which is an optical illusion, to be going backwards, and it's going back into the previous sign of Cancer. So I'll just be discussing Mars retrograde in Cancer in my January forecast, but keeping the focus for December, that Mars in being retrograde, there's this restlessness, this impatientness, but it's taking more effort. There might be more irritability with the retrograde Mars. Now, with the Mercury in retrograde, at the same time Mars is retrograde. Thank God you're a Leo or a Leo rising, because you're going to weather it so much better. But you might still be feeling a lot of anxiousness and worries of what's happening in your community, what you're watching on the national or international news. Mercury is communications and technology. And so there could be those misunderstandings. But at the same time, the first 2 weeks of December, we're having Mars retrograde. And Mars is action. And Mercury is communications. And when they're both retrograde, communications and actions trying to move forwards, but the universe is pulling you backwards. And that can really create a tremendous amount of frustrations with trying to assert yourself. And But here's where you need to look, and this is where there could be the more positive, is the retrogrades. It's time to reflect, review, and slow down. So with Mercury in retrograde, it is a time to review all the details, reflect on past decisions, rather than rushing into new commitments. Ideal for revisiting unfinished business. Mars in retrograde is when all your drive for self-expression and bold actions and taking the lead is feeling restricted, feeling frustrated, feeling blocked. So with the Mars in retrograde, you can either be angry, irritable, argumentative, depressed, because your ego wants, which is Mars, wants to keep pushing forwards, or you can realize, and maybe you're being forced into it, is to slow it down and reflect instead of how do you accomplish the next big goal? That's Mars, the warrior planet, trying to conquer the next goal. Is you're through this internal wisdom or outside circumstances, such as what if you sprain your ankle and you can't really have a lot of movement for a couple of weeks? And there's the Mars that rules action and energy, and it is all now being introverted. So with the Mars retrograde, instead of getting all bent out of shape and angry and frustrated, and you're going to see a lot of that in the world, going to be a lot of public protesting around the world, because there could be a lot of this anger. But with Mercury in retrograde, slow down, rethink, review. Mars in retrograde, it is also slow down and really look within to all your impulsive actions, your ego actions. And instead of pushing forwards, reflect on the past. So those are the Mercury and Mars in retrograde. Now, the new moon in the 5th house, December the 1st. 2 weeks after every new moon is a full moon. A full moon always brings to light anything that's been hidden, what you might have been starting with the new moon. The full moon will reveal what works and what doesn't work. In general, a full moon tests relationships. That's because the sun is opposite the moon once a month. That creates the full moon. The sun represents the individual versus the opposition to the moon that represents the public. So it's you against the world. And so the full moons will always, to some degree, be testing relationships, personal, professional. But you've got Venus, planet of love and desire, starting on December the 6th, once a year through the rest of the month, in your 7th house of partnerships and relationships. Venus can bring in a new business partner, client, negotiations. But Venus, we always think first of Venus as love and romance. And the 7th house, the first thing we think of the 7th house is marriage. So Venus in the 7th house for December can be a lot of companionships, a lot of romance, maybe there's a new infatuation. But the Venus is opposite Mars. Mars is all that physical, ambitious energies, very physical, sexual, dynamic energies. in opposition or interacting with that planet of love and desire. So during the full moon, which is always going to have some kind of testing with relationships, like usually, are you losing your individuality and identity versus trying to find union and compromise with the partner? But here's the Mars in the first house of ego, of wanting to be independent, do your own thing. But it's also interacting with this desire to find compromise and some romance with the Venus in the 7th house of relationships. Now, if you didn't have the retrograde Mars, this would be triggering a lot of infatuation and intimacy and passion. And I still think that's going to happen for a lot of Leo and Leo rising people. But the Mars is retrograde. So that could mean that you get all hot and bothered and you get infatuated, you're fascinated, and you're all turned on. And then because of the retrograde, doesn't go anywhere. Or there's all these complications and all these frustrations. Which takes me now to the full moon, 2 weeks after the new moon. The full moon revealing what's going to work or not work. Well, one of the things with the new moon in the 5th house could be romance, or a baby, or parties and entertainment. The full moon is on the 15th. Maybe the 14th, certainly the 15th, 16th, maybe the 17th, is in the 11th house, which is opposite the 5th house, because the full moon is always opposite the previous new moon. And the 11th house is the house of friendships, group activities, networking, very social time. But it's in a square to Neptune. That could mean some disappointments, some major dissolving and transitions with a friend, because the full moon, the moon, is in the 11th house of friendships. Could also be any kind of professional organization or kind of teamwork. That's all the 11th house. There might be where it's starting to dissolve or it's beginning to disappoint you. That's the Neptune. Now, Jupiter is in general expansion, prosperity. Saturn is all this responsibilities and contraction, but manifestation. So Jupiter brings all the opportunity. It can bring lots of opportunities. And when it's in harmony with Saturn, one can manifest all these opportunities. But Jupiter is in Gemini from this past end of May into June of 2024 into the beginning of June of 2025. Saturn has been in Pisces since March of 2023 through the late spring of 2025. But Jupiter in Gemini is a square or in tension, conflict, internal conflict with Saturn. Now, this peaks the end of December. It's peaking December the 24th. Now, the Jupiter wants to expand and feel optimistic about the new year. And the Saturn is putting on the brakes or saying, slow it down. The Saturn is transiting for Leo and Leo rising, your 8th house of your financial obligations. The 8th house can represent taxes, loans, credit. And with the Saturn, there's all that responsibilities, but it's being frustrated with the Jupiter-Saturn. So there might be, for the world at large, some disappointing, frustrating, economic news at the end of the year. And with Saturn in your 8th house, you could be worried about your financial obligations. But remember, in the bigger picture, you're one of the luckier ones. And the 5th house, when we're talking about business, of that new moon in the 5th house for all of December, the 5th house is the sector of investing, the stock market, speculation, and gambling. Some of you might be very lucky in gambling or with your investments. The sun leaves Sagittarius December the 21st, and it leaves the 5th house. The 5th house theme stays solid till January the 1st. But the last week of December, now the sun is changing signs into Capricorn. So your attention is starting to be broadened and more interested in other things. But the 5th house is the dominant theme. When the sun goes into Capricorn, December the 21st, till like January the 20th, January the 19th, Capricorn, the sun's in Capricorn. Capricorn is all this pragmatic, organized business energies. The 6th house is your work task. And so you could start thinking about the new year with career and finances. You may also be having to organize all of your bookkeeping for the end of the year, taxes as an example. So you're starting to get more organized with business matters, and so you can hit the ground running. You go into January with the new year. But the last week is you're still going to be more focused on the holidays and romance, fun and games, vacations, but you're getting ready, you're organizing your thoughts about business. Or maybe it's like the fun's over, it's time to get a job, get back to work. I want to thank you for watching. If you like information on how to book an astrology reading or to check out my 2-question offer, visit my website at cardino.go, that's .co. Until next month, be safe and well.